And I thought, as they sang this song, and I wrote this down, your goodness is running after me. And this is where Nehemiah, and what we'll get to, you say, well, does this go with? Yeah, it does go together. Your goodness is running after me. And that song, what it hit with me was this thought, that God reached and He got a hold of my heart. And He had to, at some point, if you sit here today and say, I am a born-again child of God, He had to, at some point, gotten a hold of your heart. It wasn't that you woke up one day and said, hey, I'm going to just chase after and find God. God had to, hey, you know what? His goodness was running after you. His mercy and His grace found you. And people would look at you and say, well, I found God. You know, what the reality is, He sent His Son for you. He established mercy. He established grace for you and I. I like what Paul says when he's cast down and Jesus looks at him, he says, it's hard for you to kick. You know what God did? He made it hard for you. Well, He started pricking your heart. He started getting a hold of you. And in that moment, it became very difficult for you to do what? To pursue any other avenue. You know why? Because when something as big as God starts to move and to work in and around you and on your heart, you know what? It's not like you just go, nah. It's not like me persuading you. I can't persuade someone to be a Christian. But I'll tell you one thing, when God, that's why He says some plant, some water, and what? God gives the increase. You know why? Because when God works, hey, it's not persuasion. God does the increasing, because when God does it, hey, nobody can undo it, because when God does a work, He authors it, Scripture says, and He finishes it. And He doesn't start anything He doesn't finish. I'm thankful for that, because if He has worked in your life and has changed your heart, you're not perfect here today, but understand, He's still growing you, He's still working in you, and He's still doing a work that will someday be brought to completion. When I look at Nehemiah, what I like about this is we're seeing here some people have a burden, some people don't have a burden. One man, Nehemiah, had a burden. And we approach this in Nehemiah. We're beginning here this morning, looking from the very beginning. That in verse number 1 of chapter 1, it says, the words of Nehemiah, the son of Hasaliah. Now it happened in the month of Chislev in the 20th year, as I was in Susa the citadel, that Hanani, one of my brothers, came with certain men from Judah, and I asked them concerning the Jews who escaped, who had survived the exile, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said to me, the remnant there in the province who had survived the exile is in great trouble and shame. He said, they go on, they tell him that what? They said that the wall of Jerusalem is broken down and its gates are destroyed by fire. He wants them to know what's happened. He says it's in terrible disrepair. The walls have been destroyed. Its gates, they were burnt to the ground, and it's a terrible shame. Now, what I like in this and what I draw from this first is they're telling the story to him. His brothers come, they're sharing the story, but there is no real burden on their behalf. It's bad. I tell you what, the remnant, I tell you what, Jerusalem's got it real bad up there. They've come back, and the Jews, they escaped. But I don't know, did they have it better in captivity or not? Because they come back home only to get what? They come back home, and the remnant, they're in the province there, and he says, they're in trouble, in shame, because everything they've come back to is just destroyed, Nehemiah. It's in terrible disrepair. I just don't know what they're going to do. You ever had somebody come to you with news like that? I don't know what they're going to do. Boy, I tell you what, they've lost everything, man. I feel bad for them. You ever had somebody share news with you like that, tell a story like that? But it's not like they have really any, I want to do something about it. It's just like, I feel bad, but, it happens to everybody. Everybody goes through hard times. I mean, never know, do you? That's what I'm reading this, and that's kind of what I imagine telling Nehemiah. Everybody kind of goes through it, don't they? And you never know when it could happen to me or you. But I look at this, and then what happens is in verse 4 that really strikes me. As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for a little bit. No, I sat down and mourned for days. And I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. Why? Because it broke him. It broke him to the point that when I see him in this moment, that he truly has his heart broken, and there is a burden placed upon him for the very people that he calls brothers, the very people that he calls sisters. His heart is broken for them, and he goes to God in a way in which he weeps, and he doesn't just pray it before his meal. He doesn't just pray it in a way that says, "Hey God, you help them down there." No, this man weeps and prays for days. Their burden, their shame, their problem became his problem. You don't pray and weep and get on your knees before God for days unless you take somebody else's burden and make it your burden. You don't get down and do something of this magnitude unless you take their burden and bring it in to your life and say, I not only sit here and say you got a bad situation, but I feel your pain, and I'm going to take that pain to the only one I know who can do something about it, and I'm not going to quit. I'm going to keep going to him. Now the thing is, sometimes we're praying like that. Sometimes people do that. But they're praying that God will send somebody, that God will do something. God, you are the one. You are the all-powerful God. God, you can do anything. God, you own the cattle on 1,000 hills. You own the hills that are on. God, you can work in this. God, you can build those walls back. God, you can bring, God, they're your people. God, you made a covenant with Israel that you would take care of them. God, they've disobeyed you. They haven't always done what's right. But God, they're your people. Take care of your people. And he's praying, I can imagine like this, praying that God would take care of his people. God, raise up somebody. Isn't it funny you pray something like that? God raises up somebody. But sometimes it's the person who has the burden. It's the person who's weeping, because you know what the problem is? Nobody else has the burden. Nobody else is weeping and praying like you are, because no one else seems to even recognize there's a problem. You know the problem with our problems? Many times we learn to adapt to the situations that we're in, and we grow comfortable in the situations we're in. I know this because in my personal life, you know what I do? And you probably do this too. There's situations right now. I got a couch right now that's got a lifetime warranty on it. Here's the problem with not a lifetime. I'm sorry, I take that back. It's got like a 5-year warranty on it. I wish it had a lifetime, but there's problems with it. Because I've got 2 kids that they've broken a couple little things, but they will come out and they'll fix anything on it. They'll fix whatever. And every day I go to push the button to put this thing out. One of the controllers works, one of them doesn't, and then I go and I sit there and I get frustrated because I'm like, and it upsets me because it doesn't work. You say, what does that got to do with God and the gospel? Because when I look at that, if it really burdened me enough, I could pick up a phone, make a call, and they would send somebody down and fix it. But you know what I do? I complain about it, sit down in my seat, find a way to get miserably comfortable, and then I do nothing because I go, if I did, you know what I'd have to do? I'd have to rearrange my schedule. I'd have to figure out a way to let them in when they come. And, it's just going to be, and they'll always schedule it at a time that's going to be inconvenient for me. It's never going to work out. And I say, it'd just be more trouble than it's worth. And yet I paid extra to have the daggone warranty on the thing. Right now, Bill's looking at me going, that's goofy as all get out. I know, because he registers everything and makes sure he uses his warranties. I got it. But you know what? We in a church do that. We know what the problems are. We know what we ought to do. We know what we should be doing. But you know what we do? We grow comfortable. You ever hear of all these churches? They grow comfortable. Boy, how did they start out so good? How did they build so much and accomplish so much? I look at the past generations, and I hear so many people in the churches, and I hung some pictures up back there on purpose because I looked back and they say, well, we look at churches and they say, well, we're older now. I hung pictures up back there because you know what? I don't see any difference today than what I saw in a church 25 and 30 years ago, because you know what they had? They had older people in them. It was a mix of a bunch of older people and some younger people. How did they accomplish what they accomplished? And I'm not just picking on our church. I think it's true in almost every church. You know what I think we do? We accomplish a lot of hard things, but then we say, well, we did it. We did it once. It's comfortable now, and yeah, things may not be where they used to be, but we're good. I'll miserably complain about the things that aren't where they should be, and because if doing anything about those things would just cause me too much trouble, and I'd have to rearrange my schedule, I'd have to show up, I'd have to do something, and I just stay where we are. But every once in a while, you have a Nehemiah who shows up, and he goes with a burden about the situation and says, I don't like it the way it is because this isn't the way it should be. Do you think Nehemiah wanted to build walls because they were pretty? Do you think Nehemiah wanted to build gates back so Jerusalem could look around and say, boy, we got the prettiest looking gates and the prettiest looking walls around? It had nothing to do with building these things for the looks. Do you know what it had to do with? It had to do with protecting the generations and all the things that would come in the future. Everything Nehemiah did was for the sake of the people. And for the sake of each generation that would come. It had nothing to do with what it looked like. Now, I'm sure everybody had an opinion on what it was going to look like once he decided he was going to start building. And some people didn't want him doing it. But here's the reality. Nehemiah grew a burden within him. And that burden took him from hearing the news. Well, it grew him from hearing the news to the burden that he had to weeping and fasting and praying, but then he goes from prayer to a plan. And I like this. In chapter 2, we pick up in verse number 1, what you see is, in the month of, a whole other month goes by, in the month of Nisan here, he says, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, it says, when wine was before him, I took up the wine, gave it to the king. Now, I had been sad in his presence. Now, here I like, he'd been sad in his presence. And the king said to me, why is your face sad? Why you look so bad? Why are you depressed all the time? You're bringing my mood down. And the king asked him, he says, you're not sick. Why are you down? This is nothing but sadness of the heart. Then I was very much afraid. He didn't want to tell what was bringing him down. I said to the king, let the king live forever. Why should not my face be sad when the city, the place of my father's graves, lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire? And the king said to me, what are you requesting? So I prayed to the God of heaven, and I said to the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's graves, that I may rebuild it. And the king said to me, the queen sitting beside him, how long will you be gone? When will you return? So it pleased the king to send me when I had given him a time. And I said to the king, if it pleases the king, let letters be given me to the governors of the province beyond the river, that they may let me pass through until I come to Judah. And a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest. Boy, he's getting full of himself now. He went from being scared to even tell the king why he was sad to now I want letters of passage that I can get all the way to Judah through all the governors so nobody gets me in trouble. And by the way, you know what? I'm going to need some stuff. So, hey, would you also, since you're in such a good mood and your queen's sitting here and she seems to be, you seem to be getting everything's good right now. He says, would you also give me this, that with a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the fortress of the temple and for the wall of the city and for the house that I shall occupy? And the king granted me what I asked. Was it because he was a good king? No. It had nothing to do. Can I tell you something? This is why when people talk to me about politics and they talk to me about anything going on, I don't care who is sitting in a political position. Our Christians have forsaken for far too long the reality of what our mission is about. Do you know our mission is not to make this world a moral world? Can I tell you what our God is going to do someday with this world? He's going to take this world and cast it where? He isn't looking to make this world more moral. He is looking to do what? He came into this world to call what? Sinners to repentance. And yet every year Christians are spending more and more money, and there are more and more groups becoming active. For what reason? To make our country more moral. And yet the problem is, we were never sent here to make Rome moral again. Jesus didn't come to make Rome moral. Jesus came to what? Seek and to save that which was lost. He came to die for sinners. The problem is, sometimes we get lost in our mission. The reality is, what do we learn from Scripture? He wasn't a good king. In fact, I can tell you, neither of these men are good men. Why? Because there's none good. No, not one. Artaxerxes is not a good man. What causes Artaxerxes to give Nehemiah what he gives him. It tells you here the king granted me what I asked for the good hand. Good hand of who? The good hand of my God was upon me. Can I tell you what? If God calls you to something, we can never say, I cannot, I will not, it just won't happen because there's too many obstacles, because the reality is this. If the good hand of God is upon whatever the mission or the vision or the thing before us is, the good hand of God will bring the things to pass, sometimes through people you never even expect, like kings who are not good men. Why? Because we know this, the king's heart is what? In the hand of the Lord, and he turns it where? Whithersoever he will. You know what? God can use whoever he wants to use. If it is a president that we like or we do not like, if it is a governor we like or we do not like, if it is a state leader, it makes no difference because their heart is in God's hand, and if God wants to use them to do something, God will use them to do it, because God will always use men he chooses to use to bring him the ultimate glory, to fulfill the purposes that he wants to fulfill. And we forget that God is the sovereign one of this world, who is ultimate. You know that the sun raises each day because God is in control. He paints every sunset, and not just the ones here. We have a universe that the sun rises on in every world. Every planet features a sun, and God holds all things. When the psalmist says what? That the heavens declare the majesty of God. We have to understand, he's not just painting a beautiful song. He is literally saying, look up to the heavens and understand that is the majesty of God. They declare what God does. And if God can do that and hold those things together every day, and your heart is still beating and you're still able, God is in control. We cannot get our eyes so focused on temporal shorthand problems, forgetting that God holds every day and every tomorrow within his grasp. And I see within Nehemiah, he asked him something that so many of us would be afraid to ask, as he was afraid. But then what did he do before he asked? I like it. He prayed. He asked God before he asked. We can be scared, but then we can say, God, give me strength. And I believe you see there how God begins to give him strength. So he moves from prayer to the plan, and he asks him for time off. He asks for letters of safe passages. He asks for timber for the king's forest, and he says God's good hand was upon him. And what we see is, faith does not just float along and go along but what faith does is faith goes in with a plan, because God is a God of order. You think God has no idea what's coming? Faith is believing that God knows what he's doing. Faith is believing that God has a plan. God's not flying by the seat of his pants saying, well, hey, we'll figure it out as we go. Faith is believing that God truly has, what does he tell us to do? He tells us that all things must be done decently and in order. There's a reason for that, because God is a God of order. If he wasn't, I tell you what, we'd have planets bumping into one another. And that wouldn't feel too good. I see here, though, not only that, there is the fact that he goes from here. Look at verse 11 with me in chapter 2. So I went, got what I needed, got those letters, got all these things. I went to Jerusalem and was there 3 days. Then I arose in the night, and I and a few men with me, and I told no one what my God had put in my heart. You know what? He didn't go out telling everybody, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And he said there was no animal with me, but the one on which I rode. And he says, I went out by the night, by the valley gate, to the dragon gate, to the dung gate, and I inspected the walls of Jerusalem that were broken down, its gates that had been destroyed by fire. Then I went on to the fountain gate, to the king's pool, but there was no room. He says, there was no room for the animal that was under me to pass. Then I went up in the night by the valley and inspected the wall, and I turned back and entered by the valley gate, and so returned. And the officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing. And I had not yet told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, and the rest who were to do the work. I didn't tell the ones who were going to have to actually work what they were getting ready to have to do. I didn't tell them I had a load of timber headed their way. I didn't tell them the project was already in the works and they just didn't know it yet. They didn't get to vote on it. They didn't get an opinion. They didn't get nothing. It was, guess what? It's going to happen, folks, because I already did the hard part. I talked to the king and I talked to God. And in this moment, he didn't tell them. It says, then I said to them, you see the trouble we're in? Have you guys looked around? Are y'all happy with this? Do you see it? How Jerusalem lies in ruins with its gates burned? I mean, that's the first time I'm seeing it. I like this because he shows up, Nehemiah, first time seeing it. He says, come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem, that we may no longer suffer derision. And I told them of the hand of my God that had been upon me for good, and also of the words that the king had spoken to me. And what? I like this. And they said, let us rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for the good work. What's amazing about that is Nehemiah was so burdened about this, but none of them ever stopped and thought, hey, let's get everybody together and let's rebuild those walls. None of them ever truly had a burden enough to hit their knees and pray. None of them ever thought, hey, maybe we should all get together. Nehemiah comes in and he says, have you folks looked around at this? This is my first time seeing it. He says, we can't sit in derision like this. We can't stay like this. I've talked to the king. I've talked to God. He says, we're going to get together and we're going to build this thing. And then all of a sudden they just look at him as if they planned it all along and said, let's rise us up and build. And the reality of that is he moves from, I can picture this being a pastor at an altar call. He moves from him inspecting the walls, and then he preaches a real short sermon, tells them this, and then gives an invitation. Hey, who wants to rise up and build? And they all look up and say, let's rise up and build. Boy, if I could give a message and then give a call like that, and 100% of the people respond and say, let's do it. Boy, I think I'd fall over. But that's what happens. Can I say this? We have got to get to a point that we grow burdened about our ruins. That we grow burdened about what we know in our place where we are. No, we don't have walls that are falling down, or a door that's burned up. But what are our ruins? You see, Christ called us to a mission. And it's not always about buying a building and all of these things. And yes, we purchase and we build and do these things, but what is the purpose that they serve? It always comes back to a purpose. It has to be to accomplish the mission to which God has called us to. If it doesn't serve the mission, then there's no purpose behind it. This building, if it doesn't serve the mission, then there's no purpose in this building. It's no different than any other building. When I look at it, we have to name what our local ruins are. We have folks within this county that need the gospel. They need to hear. They need to know what we know. We have people that long to be connected, not only for fellowship, but connected to something. They're lost, they're searching, they're depressed and down, disconnected. Well, they are in need of a Savior. They're in need of what we would say a body. Wednesday night we talked about one body, many members. The body doesn't consist of one member. What do they consist of? It consists of many members. We see that in 1 Corinthians 12. It's one body, but it's many members. Each one has their part to play. Can I say this? When we talk about building a wall, do you know who doesn't participate in building walls? And you'll find this, or in any other aspect. The body will participate in the building. Consumers don't build walls. They show up when the building is done. They show up when it's all put together to do what? To partake of what has been done. But do you know who comes and gives of themselves and gives not only of their time, but of their goods? I mean, the king, who's not even a part of this place, he gave his lumber. The people will give what they have of their materials to do this build, to build these walls. Why? Because they know that this is not only going to keep them safe and protect their families, but they know that it will protect future generations. They know that this is important for the generations to come. You know, what we do here is not only for today's generation, everything that we do, but we're also looking ahead to the generations to come. Consumers don't do that. But those who are a part of the body do. Those who say, well, I'm the hand, I'm the foot. Those who say, I've got a part in the body and I'm going to do something. Because you know one thing about it is, I said this morning when I woke up, I didn't have to tell my hand to be a hand. I didn't have to remind it was a hand. I need you to work today because I got to open my Bible. I hope you do your job. I didn't have to remind my feet to do their walking, even though they fell asleep a little bit while I was sitting back there working on some stuff. I had to move my leg around a little bit. I didn't have to remind them what their purpose was. You know why? They knew their purpose. They knew their place. And they did their job. You know, we don't need to wait to be told. You know what we do? We look for the gap where we are to feel, and we take our place on the wall. And we'll learn about that coming up. Because the vision is there of what we have. When we look at worship, when we look at fellowship, when we look at our discipleship, when we look at ministry, all the things, I look ahead. We have a city, a village, a town, all the things that we look around us that needs to be prayed over, that needs to be continually, has people that have a burden for it. And there's some of us that are great prayer warriors that can say, hey, I'm going to have a burden and pray for these things. You know what? We have to find those people that say, hey, I'm going to get back to praying like I used to pray because I've grown lax in it. Those things affect things. We have to find a way, a means to disciple others, because if we don't teach and train and bring others on and pass on what we have to the next generation, then understand the world disciples. Chick-fil-A disciples. Lots of places disciple. But the church is not discipling the way that it should. We're not teaching the next generation and bringing them to a place of understanding. Sometimes we babysit our children to keep them quiet so we can do what we need to do, but we're not discipling them sometimes. You know what we need to be doing? We need to be discipling them and understand there's a real purpose behind what we do. It's not a babysitting time. If you're called to children's ministry, understand you're called to discipling children. If you're called to teach adults, you know what you're called to do? Disciple them. Doing life in their lives. Being with them. It's to grow people and not just numbers. There is, when I look at fellowship, you know what fellowship is? is being a part of people's lives because people need fellowship. Last Sunday, what's the point of it? What's the point of just another meal? I'll tell you what the point of it is. Bringing people out like, I think it's Sister Joyce, who doesn't always get to be here. She gets to sit down with people and she gets to enjoy that time. These things fill the gaps and make the place what it ought to be. I understand the more that we do this, I want you to see there is a man named Sanballat and Tobiah, and we'll talk more about them. You know what? When we do what we are called to do and what we are supposed to do, you know what? I want you to understand, expect opposition. Nobody does something. You see, if you do nothing, don't worry about ever having opposition or getting talked about or having a problem, because guess what? People that do nothing, nothing ever happens. Besides growing some moss, I guess. But if you do something and start doing, expect opposition. It will happen. The more that we do and start following God in what He would have us to be called to do, understand there will be opposition. It may not even be opposition within the church. It may be opposition outside the wall. People throwing rocks at us. I don't know. But that doesn't hinder us from doing the work. I love it. They took up a sword and they had the hammers in the other hand. They were fighting the fight and doing the work. The question is, do we continue the work and fight the fight that God has placed us? There is spiritual warfare, but there is also a call that we've been given of the gospel. Where is our place within the body? Father, this morning, I love Nehemiah's burden. I love that he went to you and he prayed. And he prayed for days. But then God, it wasn't even like he waited on this big loud voice from heaven. Sometimes we're waiting on, well, God hasn't physically and audibly told me. No, Lord, he just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And somebody said, what's your burden? What's your burden? God, I pray that we would get a burden. And then, God, I pray that we would be moved to do something about that burden. God, I pray that you would place the burden. May we see the ruins. May we see the things. God, this morning, I pray that you would work within us. Help us to see what it is that you are working in us on, what you want us to do. Restore those burdens. Lord, I ask you to work now, we pray, in your Son's name.